So I was kind of looking into the chapters here and why they even brought in the Federal Reserve System. And as you guys might remember from last class, it's because to give all the benefits out that we do in our social welfare policy, this year inclusive, like paying for the pandemic relief, you need to fund it somehow. You need the money to pay for things. So the US Federal Reserve is actually what controls the money and the discount rate and how things kind of get paid for in social welfare. So we kind of scrolled through. It also had definitions of social policy, which is the process by which a course of action is selected, defined, promoted. Social services are activities conducted by social welfare institutions, like personal services and then institutional services. So they referred the insurance as one of the possibilities in like a benefit by being a part of a family. Like I work and get insurance through Central State, so my wife and kids now get their insurance. They also threw in definition of liberals, definition of conservatives. I feel like they missed the Green Party and the Libertarians, but basically conservatives think there should be less government involved and more of like an individual work ethic. Liberals support government intervention in the economy to offset the failures of capitalism. They disfavor legal enforcement of private morality and insist on equality of access and opportunity. They put the conservatives with believe the role of government should be limited, place greater emphasis on economic freedom and free enterprise, and then encourage individual achievement and favor the expansion of the private sector. So they're all working for these things in government, though: stability, harmony, and then hopefully evolution, like we move forward. One of the theories they put out here is that we have a conflict theory with things that were like structured inequality. They even mentioned the tax systems. And then economics, which I found interesting that you can teach in the School of Social Work if you have a doctorate in economics. So I always wondered why economics was so interesting to me, being a social worker. And it's because economics kind of helps explain income, production, and distribution of goods and services. And as a social worker, we're trying to get everyone's needs met. So you're distributing sometimes goods and services. The nice part about the paper you guys are writing is if you pick a policy and just like search it on the internet, you're going to get more information than you even need about. It'll be interesting to see the Pandemic Welfare Act from last year, or even Section 8 housing, food pantries, things of that nature. And the last time we had our budget balance in the United States of America was when President Bill Clinton was in power. So if you guys remember how long ago that was, it might have been before you were born, I think. 1999. So Clinton was our president from 92 till 2001. And he was the last balanced budget we had. Ever since then, we've had a lot of issues with our monetary policy. So the discount rate, the federal funds, and this movie, just like similar to the movies on Tuesday, explain a lot. I'm not going to have us watch all of them, but maybe just the intro about the Federal Reserve. And then I pasted this into our updates. But this is how we create money in the US, which really sounds weird, like creation of money, because you really can't create it, but we found a way that we can create it now. We actually have a printing press and we print the money. And 110 years ago, this is how the Federal Reserve started. They try to explain it here with a little history. Love advertisements. Sorry about that. Is that visible to you? kind of fuzzy.
1775, the American Revolutionary War began as the American colonies sought to detach from England and its oppressive monarchy. Though many reasons are cited for the revolution, one in particular sticks out as the prime cause: that King George III of England outlawed the interest-free, independent currency the colonies were producing and using for themselves, in turn forcing them to borrow money from the Central Bank of England at interest, immediately putting the colonies into debt. And as Benjamin Franklin later wrote, the refusal of King George III to allow the colonies to operate an honest money system which freed the ordinary man from the clutches of money manipulators was probably the prime cause of the revolution. In 1783, America won its independence from England. However, its battle against the central bank concept and the corrupt, greed-filled men associated with it had just begun. So what is a central bank? A central bank is an institution that produces the currency of an entire nation. Based on historical precedent, two specific powers are inherent in central banking practice: the control of interest rates and the control of the money supply, or inflation. The central bank does not simply supply a government's economy with money, it loans it to them at interest. Then, through the use of increasing and decreasing the supply of money, the central bank regulates the value of the currency being issued. It is critical to understand that the entire structure of this system can only produce one thing in the long run: debt. It doesn't take a lot of ingenuity to figure this scam out. For every single dollar produced by the central bank is loaned at interest. That means every single dollar produced is actually the dollar plus a certain percent of debt based on that dollar. And since the central bank has a monopoly of the production of the currency for the entire country, and they loan each dollar out with immediate debt attached to it, where does the money to pay for the debt come from? It can only come from the central bank again, which means the central bank has to perpetually increase its money supply to temporarily cover the outstanding debt created, which in turn, since that new money is loaned out at interest.
So that chart, that's just to 2000, and that's how much money has been printed. If they update it to what we did in 2008 and 2009, where they doubled our money supply from $1 trillion to $2 trillion, and then also another time during the pandemic, our money supply was at like 2.5 or 3 trillion, and now it's at $6 trillion. So they have to keep printing it. It seems kind of like, okay, what's the big deal about that? If any of you take out student loans, I don't know if you guys take out student loans at all. A lot of times that's where it comes from. They just print that money off and give it to us, and then we have to pay it back. So that's why it started to interest me about 12 years ago. I know this is kind of a dull movie, but there's only 5 minutes left.
As well, creates even more debt. The end result of this system without fail is slavery, for it is impossible for the government and thus the public to ever come out of the self-generating debt. The founding fathers of this country were well aware of this. By the early 20th century, the U.S. had already implemented and removed a few central banking systems, which were swindled into place by ruthless banking interests. At this time, the dominant families in the banking and business world were the Rockefellers.
Those dudes are still alive, by the way, too. The Rockefellers, there's still a family that owns the whole world currency, and there's some of the Morgans are still alive, too.
The Morgans, the Warburgs, the Rothschilds.
They're still alive.
In the early 1900s, they sought to push, once again, legislation to create another central bank. However, they knew the government and public were very weary of such an institution, so they needed to create an incident to affect public opinion. So, J.P. Morgan, probably considered a financial luminary at the time, exploited his mass influence by publishing rumors that a prominent bank in New York was insolvent or bankrupt. Morgan knew this would cause mass hysteria, which would affect other banks as well.
So he lied that the bank was out of money, essentially. So everybody ran to the bank to get their money out. And this was in 1913, so this was only 108 years ago. And that's how they decided to create the central bank after this.
And it did. The public, in fear of losing their deposits, immediately began mass withdrawals. Consequently, the banks were forced to call in their loans, causing recipients to sell their property, and thus a spiral of bankruptcies, repossessions, and turmoil emerged. Putting the pieces together a few years later, Frederick Allen of Life magazine wrote, "The Morgan interests took advantage to precipitate the panic, guiding it shrewdly as it progressed." Unaware of the fraud, the panic of 1907 led to a congressional investigation headed by Senator Nelson Aldrich, who had intimate ties to the banking cartels and later became part of the Rockefeller family through marriage. The commission, led by Aldrich, recommended a central bank should be implemented so a panic like 1907 could never happen again. This was the spark the international bankers needed to initiate their plan. In 1910, a secret meeting was held at a J.P. Morgan estate on Jekyll Island off the coast of Georgia. It was there that the central banking bill called the Federal Reserve Act was written. This legislation was written by bankers, not lawmakers. This meeting was so secretive, so concealed from government and public knowledge, that the 10 or so figures who attended were told they could only use their first names in addressing each other. After this bill was constructed, it was then handed over to their political frontman, Senator Nelson Aldrich, to push through Congress. And in 1913, with heavy political sponsorship by the bankers, Woodrow Wilson became president, having already agreed to sign the Federal Reserve Act in exchange for campaign support. And 2 days before Christmas, when most of Congress was at home with their families, the Federal Reserve Act was voted in, and Wilson in turn made it law. Years later, Woodrow Wilson wrote, in regret,
That was during World War One. I guess he wrote that after his.
Congressman Lewis McFadden also expressed the truth after the passing of the bill. A world banking system was being set up here, a superstate controlled by international bankers, acting together to enslave the world for their own pleasure. The Fed has usurped the government. Now, the public was told that the Federal Reserve System was an economic stabilizer, and inflation and economic crises were a thing of the past. Well, as history has shown, nothing is further from the truth. The fact is, the international bankers now had a streamlined machine to expand their personal ambitions. For example, from 1914 to 1919, the Fed increased the money supply by nearly 100%, resulting in extensive loans to small banks and public. And then in 1920, the Fed called in mass percentages of the outstanding money supply, thus resulting in supporting banks having to call in huge numbers of loans, and just like 1907, bank runs, bankruptcy, and collapse occurred. Over 5,400 competitive banks outside of the Federal Reserve System collapsed, further consolidating the monopoly of the small group.
So that's the end of the first one. I'm not going to bore you guys with any more, unless if you do find that interesting, I put it into these updates, which is kind of like the announcement area. And if you click on that, it should show parts 1 through 5. And it essentially goes through. Back then, as I was explaining, money was a $20 bill was an ounce of gold, and a $1 bill was an ounce of silver. And so they also, in 1933, undid part of that. They probably go through that in part 2 and then part 3 as interesting, history, just to show how money creation, as I've mentioned, it's not all bad. There's a good and a bad side to it. The good side is we do fund some public policies that truly do help poor people and those that are struggling with services. So they're able to print that money and give it to those who need it. The bad side of it is they also can print that money, and when they undid the monetary silver in 1964, that's how they funded Vietnam War. So it's also a way that they print $1 billion and can go fund wars in different parts of the country, the world, I should say. And the U.S. still occupies like 50 countries. Why is that important? That's how we get the cheap oil and electricity that kind of subsidize our nation here. we get the benefit of it. So the hard part is understanding that a lot of Americans do get some of the benefit of it. They keep us happy and entertained with the Super Bowl and warm house and a full belly, but sometimes exploitation happens to others. So I won't show you the rest of these. You don't have to watch them, but if a monetary system is of interest to you, that's kind of the very beginning of it. And it's only been 100 years. There will be discussions this week in Congress about monetary policy again. They're debating whether or not we need to increase the money supply again, because the economy is slow and they want to speed it up. So they want to get money out and get people spending money. There's theory that they're going to give us electronic dollars next. You know how there's like Bitcoin and stuff like that. Have you guys ever heard of those Bitcoins?
Yeah.
So there's a rumor that the government may give us money that's electronic, and we have to go spend it within 90 days or it disappears. And that's the way to like get the economy going quickly, is what people did with the check last year. They said the majority of Americans, if they were able to, they saved it. They just put it into their bank account and you save it for bad times or rainy day. But to jump our economy again, they need people to spend it. So there's theory out there that we're going to have a digital US dollar next that will be like, I guess we kind of have that with like credit cards and how you take money out of you guys ever use Apple Pay or like, so we kind of already have it, but now it's going to be US money and then it'll have an expiration date on it, which is kind of weird. I don't know. I don't know if that bill will pass, but that's something that is in discussion. So, as I mentioned, how do they control the monetary policy? They do the discount rate, and that's percentage. Do you guys remember what the interest rate is right now for us? And for it is for us, you're right. So for us, it's about 2% for a 30-year housing loan. I was talking to the dude yesterday to refinance my house. The US bank gets it for 0, but that's how they make their money. So they get the loans for 0. It's at like 0.1 or 0.2 right now. They lend it to us at like 2 or 2.5. For a car, they might lend it to you for 3 or 3.5. If you have bad credit, they'll say, yeah, we'll give you $10,000 for that car you want to buy on the used car lot at 10% interest, which means every year you have to pay $1,000 on that $10,000 loan, if that makes sense, until you pay it off. Once it's paid off, you don't have to pay the interest. So that's why they say, don't go into too much debt. Federal funds rate is the rate banks pay for interbank borrowing of money overnight. That one, I'm going to be honest with you, I can't even explain what the hell that one means. I do know this caused problems a year and a half ago. So again, if you are interested in money policy, what happens is the overnight lending rate in September of 2019 spiraled out of control to the point where banks were lending to each other at a pretty high rate, like 5 to 10%. So the US had to step in and start lending overnight $1 billion to US Bank or PNC or Fifth Third at a normal rate again, which is like 2% or 0. And that caused problems that some say precipitated coronavirus to take over like the global economy and stuff. So just some food for thought, right when Corona started, I think it was March. So it's not even been a year. They passed that $3 trillion bill. And that's one of the things you could write about in your paper policy. And I'll look that up here in a minute as we finish chapter 6. But monetary policy is supposed to, money is supposed to store value. So that's a lot of times in the past, since Jewish times and Jesus times, they used gold and silver because that stuff lasted forever. They still have coins from the Roman Empire and like from Jesus' time. And it's a store of value and it never corrodes. It doesn't rust. You can cut it in half and it's worth half as much. It's a facilitator of transactions. Again, why some people use gold and silver. Bitcoin works is that the one thing Bitcoin comes short of is that the store of value is like if the power grid went down, you can't give somebody a Bitcoin. You know what I mean? Like they don't really have. So if we ever had like a bad storm and for a week you can't use your credit cards, Bitcoin went down. So dollars are good there. But again, paper dollars over time corrode and we have to like take them back in and destroy it, whereas gold and silver coins don't. and it's a unit of account. So we were looking up if your parents or grandparents held their money from 1964. And then this is what we came up with in the last class. I think it was, yeah, there it is. If they kept 4 quarters, it would be worth, from 1964, it's worth $30.26. If they kept a roll of dimes, it would be worth $144 because it's silver. They're all 90% silver. And if they kept a roll of quarters, it would be worth $288, which blows my mind. Like my dad was doing laundry with, and that's why stuff was so cheap back then too. It was real silver money. You can buy a bag of these. It's crazy. Yeah, you can buy 250 face value, which would be 1,000 quarters for $7,000. So crazy. I know, because it was pocket change, like during the civil rights movement in 1964. It's like 50 cents really meant something. You buy a burger for a dime. So closing out this chapter, social welfare system, corporate and individual welfare. So we all pay taxes. Our tax expenditures are losses attributable to provisions of the federal tax laws that allow special exclusions, exemptions, or deductions from gross income. For example, we don't make that much money right out of college and wherever, and usually you won't pay taxes until you make above like 25 or 35,000 a year. You'll probably get a refund. Also provide special credits, preferential tax rates, or deferral tax liabilities, which sometimes you can take advantage of those. Like I bought my electric car, Chevy Volt. It was like $29,000. The government gave me $7,500 to buy that. So that was one of the tax benefits. And for whatever reason, Chevy had 0% finance. So I was able to finance the $22,000 on that car at 0%. And it still was $400 a month, but I didn't have to pay for gas. So I was like, this works. I plug in my car, I got free gas. So you can take advantage of these, child discounts. Like if you have a kid, you take $5,000 off your taxes. If you have 2 kids, it's like $10,000. So those are some of the things that come off from that. Now, this could be a topic of any of your all's papers and or the CARES Act. So like with social welfare policy, this was the one that was passed last year. It's almost been a year, like 11 months. So also known as the CARES Act, it was $2.2 trillion. That is, you guys know what a trillion is, right? Because it's hard to explain it almost sometimes. It's basically 1,000 billion, I guess. And a billion is 1,000 million, and a million is 1,000 thousand. So they said if you stack those bills like on a trillion, I think some people have visuals, it could stack up to the moon or outer space or something ridiculous like that. So that's a lot of money. It was an economic stimulus bill passed by the 116th U.S. Congress. This was just 10 and a half months ago. Signed into law by President Trump March 27th, 2020, in response to the economic fallout of the COVID-19 pandemic in the United States. So there's lots of videos on this act you can write about. There's lots of research on it. They're doing another one, so you could even do the updates. This was from today. So the stimulus update, Pelosi says the relief bill will pass, so we'll probably all get $1,000 again. And so if we all get 1,000 and there's 300 million in the US, I guess they would have to make it 300 billion because that would be 1,000 million. Yeah. I'm not great at math, but I'm trying to explain it. We're always fighting in Congress about some of these. What were some of the other topics? Are there topics you guys had in mind? I know it's still 2 weeks early, but if you get it in your mind now, it'll be easier to write it. I'll show you these topics because they're in the syllabus. And maybe one just like sings to you. You're like, oh, that's a sweet looking topic right there. I'm doing that one. So here's the first round of topics under the first paper. And that would be, just remember to cite. That's essentially like with cheating and plagiarism. As long as you cite your source and have it APA, like Trouth, 2021. Like I wrote some articles in 2020 and 2021. You cite Give credit to the other author. You don't get in trouble for plagiarism. One good site to do research on also, well, here's the first paper, just so you can see some of the topics, and I'll show you where I would search it. Unemployment insurance, that's one topic. Workers' compensation, that's another topic. Contributions of American business to retirement planning, that's another one. Public assistance programs, and you could give the history, what it's doing now, anything left of it. Temporary assistance to the needy, also known as TANF. Supplemental security income. Medicare and Medicaid, you're going to have the most info on. It might almost be overwhelming. Food and shelter programs, like if you are doing any volunteer work, you may volunteer at a shelter program. Public housing and Section 8 housing assistance. Like in Cincinnati, we have it's called Cincinnati Metropolitan Housing Authority, and you only pay based off of your income. And then you can even do current shelter issues like the homeless, publicly funded programs in American social welfare, other voluntary services for the nonprofit sector. So it is 4 pages. If you were to do any of these look interesting to any of you guys, I'll search it for you if you see one that you like that you want to write about. And you could do the COVID relief plan from last year too, as obviously there's all this stuff, but now I forget where I searched it for you.
I'm doing the COVID relief plan.
It is interesting, as you'll find out how much money we'll get. Okay, so I was going to say do this, and you could also do this is how you get some good articles. I always go into here, and it shows you how to cite them. And you all can write on this, so it's not like if one of you picks it, the other one can't. COVID relief bill. And I guess there'll be one in 2020 and also one. So there's already tons. You almost want to, I guess you wouldn't want anything before 2020 because it never happened until. So you would do since 2020. If you wanted to cite something, here's how you cite it, APA. I love that because that makes it easy. You just paste that in the bottom of your paper alphabetically. It tells you who wrote it, how they wrote it. This means they have a full text. Can download these and print them out. And 4 pages, you can see people wrote dozens of pages on these articles. Because it was a lot of money. I mean, that's a lot. When we did the economic viability plan in 2009, how much money do you think they printed back then? Any of you guys remember? So you could also do a paper on that one if that's interesting to you guys, but let's do that. Relief bill of 2009, if that's even there. I would say anytime, not. They printed $1 trillion. I guess that's what I was trying to get at for you. But yeah, you can, there's NIH because there was a lot of money given to the National Institute of Health for testing and masks and you can even share it on Facebook. Isn't that fun? That's hilarious. I love doing random posts like that. What the hell are you sharing? I don't know why it's fun, just because they're and then just don't even give a thought about it. You just tweet it out.
I have a question regarding the project.
So
when we're writing the 4-page essay and stuff, what exactly are we writing about? Because I understand we're writing about social welfare issues.
So here, these last 2 will cover it. So the paper should discuss the chosen social welfare topic, as well as thoroughly and thoughtfully explore how it's a matter of social welfare, how it took care of people, how it served the underserved or everybody in the sense of coronavirus. It didn't matter how rich you were, you could catch and die of coronavirus. And then as well as how social workers should handle an issue such as that within their practice. So one thing in my social worker practice, I was able to see people digitally and they would pay for it. Whereas the year before that, they paid different for digital. And with COVID, they basically paid you the same to counsel somebody digitally, like through this, like not Facebook, but I think it was Doxy.me is the HIPAA approved one. That's one way how it affected social workers. A lot of social also apply for like $1 million if they were going to go out of business. They could say, we need $1 million. It's a forgivable loan. The government would send it to them. You also can do your presentation either on this or the next one. So that's where the sign up is. It's either the first or the second paper. You'll make a PowerPoint from it. So the paper should include presentation, will be presented to the class, highlight pertinent. That's if you choose to do the PowerPoint for the first paper. If you choose to do the PowerPoint for the second paper, it's this social justice topic, which is like child labor, access to clean water, food, shelter. Again, a bunch of social policy laws we've passed. Does that answer your question? I should make sure it answers you first.
Yeah.
Okay.
So like the combination of both of those two papers is going to be 6 pages, correct?
Oh, I see what you're saying. Because this one, does it say how long this one is? Oh, that's a short one. Yeah. So that's right. Yeah. So a 4-page paper and a 2-page paper, and either one of those you do your PowerPoint on. If you'd rather do your PowerPoint, and I put the sign up, I think, back here. If you want to do the PowerPoint right away, some people like getting it done in 2 weeks. You can present to us in class the last week of February. If you're a procrastinator like I was, you could do March. If you're a real procrastinator, you could even do the first week of April after Easter or the second week of April. So there's always only a few major assignments, but that's why, with like a discussion board every week and stuff like that, that's like the gist of your assignments and whatnot. Do any of you have Social Work 101 in here today? Okay. Because I promised them I have some people that are in both classes, and that Intro to Social Work is all online. So I said if they come now, because this is a hybrid, I could end a little early and teach Social Work 101 in person. They could ask live questions. But if none of you guys are here, just make sure I start up chapter 7, which I know we're cruising through it, but I want to get you to modern day policy and, the stuff that's being passed. Any questions about the paper and like what we're doing? I know the movie this weekend is How Money Became Worthless. I was going to start playing that. If you guys would rather just like watch it on your own in your dorm, you're welcome to do that. If it's boring to watch it here, I understand. If it's 81 degrees, I'd be falling asleep. So I get it. These masks start getting nasty, don't they? I need to wash them. That's why I like the throwaway ones better. They give you guys throwaway ones anywhere? You have to buy your own box of them? Really? I didn't know that. What about if you went to like Walmart and Kroger's where they have a big, you just take a stack in your pocket? I mean, that's what I got this one at work today, but I work for hospice. Did I tell you guys what hospice is? Where you sit with folks. Have you ever had a grandparent or mother or father on hospice? Is basically end of life care. So if they're given 6 months or less, and they want somebody with them 24 hours a day. So you'll have a social worker sit with them and just kind of document how they're breathing. So I work there, and we have to get like corona tests every week. And then they're even giving us the vaccine if we want it. So, and that's again, part of the COVID relief fund. Like Biden's putting out 300 million shots. You guys want to get the vaccine?
No.
That's exactly what I said. But everybody thinks I'm a weird anti-vaxxer at work because they're all like, yay, a vaccine's here. I'm like, I know. I know.
Falling on the floor? No.
My freaking dad got it. I could not talk him out of it. And he's 75 years old. Monday, I call him like, Mom, how's Dad doing 2 weeks after the vaccine? That's usually when people get sick. She's like, he's fine. So I guess he's just a healthy. They say if you have blood type O, you're least likely to get coronavirus. You guys know your blood types? It's hard to, you got to remember when the doctor, I apparently am O positive. So I guess I might not get it, but I just don't want a vaccine either. I'm sorry. Anyway, we'll finish up a little bit here. Like, again, social welfare policy is supposed to serve others. There are social justice elements to it. But again, first and foremost is meeting the basic needs of everyone. So food, water, shelter. I really feel like money policy is a big issue because if all of us don't have enough money, doesn't that kind of become an issue? Like if everybody doesn't have money, isn't that, and that's kind of why they think we should do the $12,000 a year standard income for everybody. I'm just worried that will set and spiral a huge inflationary problem. So anyway, social welfare programs are intended to meet certain needs, deal with specific problems, enhance life, and they're implemented to achieve particular goals in relations to needs. Could you guys see any of these things in relation to your major, your current major? I forget what your majors are again. I always ask you to. Okay, yeah. I could kind of see that. How about, what's that? Yeah, because like, I think a social justice issue is private prisons. Have you watched the movie 13th? It's about the 13th Amendment of the United States. That's another big one that if you're able to watch it, I would watch it. What's your major again?
Criminal justice.
Okay. So the same. Are you also CJ or are you?
No, I'm psychology.
Oh, that's right. Okay, yeah, because I said, remember, if you double with social work, you will get a license at the end of your tenure here and qualify for a year off of your documentary. I'll just show you what's that thing called? Trailer. This is a huge movie that you might actually. Have you?
I didn't see it, but I know about it.
It's kind of a big deal. I don't have net. Oh, shoot. Am I not going to be able to watch a trailer without? Let's see here. Should I do because they should get the trailer for free, shouldn't they? All right, here we go. You got to watch this one. Because this is.
It's in your nature to reach for more.
Commercial. Especially for criminal justice.
With their hands on the bars, shackled in the world, are locked up here in the land of the free.
Khalif Browder was walking home from a party when he was stopped by police.
Then they said, we're going to take you to the precinct, and most likely we're going to let you go home. And then I never went home.
13th Amendment to the Constitution makes it unconstitutional for someone to be held as a slave. There are exceptions, including criminals.
Paul was immediately exploited. What you got after that was a rapid transition to a mythology of Black criminality.
Aliens, beasts that needed to be controlled.
You better believe it.
It became virtually impossible for a politician to run and appear soft on crime.
The kinds of kids that are called super predators.
Millions of dollars will be allocated for prison and jail facilities. 3 strikes and you are out.
There's an enormous burden on the Black community, but it also violated a sense of full fairness.
States were required to keep these prisons filled, even if nobody was committing crime.
It's so difficult to talk about mass incarceration because it has become heavily monetized. The focus is on taking people from prison, putting them in community corrections, parole, probation.
How much progress is it really? Now there's a private company making money off the GPS monitor.
We now have more African Americans under criminal supervision than all the slaves back in the 1850s.
We are the products of the history that our ancestors chose. Products of that set of choices that we have to understand in order to escape from.
Human, after all,
So the shocking thing to me is in that documentary, they show every politician Every politician. There's not one politician exempt from it. Every politician has some play in those bills that were passed for, like, you know, even having private prisons in the first place. That's what concerns me, because if you have a private prison instead of one run by the government, it means it's like for profit. So that means they cut out education. They won't give people rehabilitation, you know, like to get like your bachelor's degree or an associate's degree, or to learn a trade so that you're rehabilitated out of prison so that you don't go back to crime, to going back into prison, you know, like you're trained. And a lot of private prisons cut out, you know, health benefits, things that are important, and interesting documentary, to say the least. So if you haven't seen it, do you have Netflix? I don't, but
You don't have to watch it.
I know it's
Interesting.
yeah, and you know, I used to get really bored by like the 13th Amendment of the Constitution or the 25th Amendment, you know, like hearing that, I just, like, my eyes will roll back in my head. But it's like, this is stuff that really affects me now. Like, this affects like the way that I live with my family, with my friends, with everybody in the world. Like, these are laws that govern us. And you know, the U.S. was the first country to abolish slavery, and there are still countries that do have slavery, which blows my mind. I had no idea. There's still countries like the one that Gaddafi was president of in 2011. I'm totally blanking on it, but they have a real problem with it right now. The child sex slave trade, you know, stuff like that. Like, if you get, I don't know if you guys get into that in criminal justice, but it's certainly, you know, they say Super Bowl is one of the largest trafficking days of the world. So some of these policies created for the betterment, you know, certainly. Do they get you guys into the debate on like death penalty and stuff, or what are they kind of getting into with criminal justice?
I don't have any, but
You don't have any CJ classes? How many do you have to take?
I don't even know. My class, it don't have no time or nothing on here. So
What's the name of the class you're taking?
it's intro.
Oh, okay. Intro to CJ. Okay. I don't know enough about CJ, but it is interconnected with social work. I do like that in social work we get a license. I wish I didn't get a bachelor's in psychology because I didn't get a license. But, you know, it's the same. It's like putting to action the things that we're learning in class, which is interesting to me, you know. Yeah.
What was that topic called? Like the whole like incarceration of Black people. What is that called? Like, or like the social justice topic. Like,
Now you're making me think. Any of you guys remember? I'm like, my brain today doesn't want to work. Let's
I
see.
know the movie's called 13, but I'm like, for like the social justice, like, would be called incarceration.
Oh, what's the issue? Are you writing a paper on it soon, you're saying? Or
I mean, for the social justice thing, like, I'm just.
oh, okay. You're asking if it fits under any of the topics that we have right there.
Yes.
Let me see. Were we in this one? Is it this one? Cheezel Pete's. I am lost. I think, it's this one, wasn't it? No? Can you read the list of topics? Maybe I can just auditorily hear them if you're reading them off to me.
It says child labor, access to clean water, food, shelter, human dignity, how poverty affects human rights.
Human dignity, for sure.
Okay.
Even child labor, in a sense. Because if they're allowed, like, have you heard that they make like license plates in those prisons for 13 cents per hour for the state of Ohio? You guys ever heard that? Like, they pay them, but they give them 13 cents an hour. So it's like, that's slave labor, dude. I don't care who you're talking to. That's messed up. 13 cents, like, for real. Like, maybe if it was silver dime, okay, but even then.
Right.
So anyway, yeah, so that could be a social justice topic.
So just incarceration and how it is with human dignity.
Yeah, like especially private prisons and how they don't include rehabilitation in those private prisons because they're in it for the money. If they paid for you to get like your college degree, which is some of the taxpayers' complaints, like, I don't want to pay for them to get a degree. Well, do you want to pay for them to be in prison the rest of their life, or you getting stolen from when they get out if they're not rehabilitated. Because if you don't get rehabilitation, you're not going to get better. Like, you need to have the chance. That's why I don't believe in the death penalty. You know what I mean? Is like, we have to have the chance to learn from our mistake, be rehabilitated. And I know that's a huge argument you guys may get into in criminal justice. Just like, when is the death penalty okay? What do you think? Like, should we?
I feel like, I don't know, when they kill somebody or something.
Right. Which is when usually people are like, all right, you killed somebody, you're going to get shot up with that glue or whatever they put in you to make you die. But it's, so there's enough to be said about it. But I do think most situations, especially the weed stuff, like they were locking people up. Biden passed that. The one where they had Hillary Clinton saying super predators, they were talking about the 3 strikes and you're out, and like locking people up for weed. That was a mess. Like, they were in jail for like 10 to 20 years for freaking weed. Like, really? For weed? Come on. I mean, yes, weed is not great for you, but you need to be locked up for 10 years on the taxpayer's dime and never get rehabilitated because of freaking weed. So anyway, I'll get off my rant. Constitution is, believe it or not, semi-interesting, because we were like the first country to end slavery. As messed up as our country is, we were the first country to like let women vote. That was only 100 years ago. So like some of our grandmothers couldn't vote when they were born. Like my grandma was born before 1919. She's dead now, but women couldn't vote till 1919. You know, as messed up as some of the things, the Constitution is kind of key to have some force of justice, so to speak. So I am stopping there before. What week are we even in school, by the way? I don't even know what week this is. Is it the 4th? Because I think it was 19th, 26th, 1st, 8th. You're right. So then Monday will be the 5th. Okay. We're a third of the way through the semester, essentially. And I like to get done a little sooner. Well, yeah, to leave time for PowerPoint presentations and any questions on papers and stuff. But I feel like we killed it for today. That's about.
Okay, so was there any work like before this? Because like when I got here, they had my schedule all messed up, and they like just got it fixed. I just got it fixed Monday.
Oh, are you in Schoology?
I just got my password for Schoology Monday.
Okay. I'll keep them open for you then. So every week there will be a discussion. Here's what it'll look like. You'll have your first week. Is this the right class? I hope I'm in the right class. So there's a discussion every week, which would mean we're in the 4th week. So there's only been 3 that are due. I'll make sure those are open for you and just remind me to not like grade you late or with a 0. Like, dude, I was the one who just signed up. I have 170 students, so it's hard to keep them all straight. But I'll open them so you can just do a discussion and then reply to classmates. And nothing's due until that first paper, right? Am I even looking at the right side? Yeah, individual social welfare topic. So that's all in the syllabus. So that's the first major assignment. But because it's hybrid, there's a discussion with replies to classmates every week. Does that help answer the question?
Yeah.
So I'll leave them open so you can. It won't take that long to get caught up.
Okay, so each discussion, I have to answer the question and then reply to somebody else.
Yes. Were you here when we watched this a week ago, or did you just get in?
My first day here was in Frisbee.
Okay. So you were here when we watched Poor Policy, the movie that was 50 minutes long. And that was the second discussion?
50 minutes? Mm-mm.
I think it was. No?
Mm-mm.
Did we watch that last Thursday?
We watched that last week.
Was it last Tuesday though?
Tuesday was when it snowed.
And
I was
then
only here we watched the video. I think it was like, what? I don't know. Was it 15 minutes?
oh right, it was about like the money policy, because I'm kind of hammering home the justice issue with money, because sometimes it's hard to wrap our brain around it because we're so engulfed with money. We think, I don't know. And then we don't realize that there are banks that are actually out to screw us, believe it or not. I don't know. Maybe you guys have good experiences with banks, but I feel like they charge a lot of fees and make us pay a lot of interest, and the money's so yeah, this one it's like maybe 45 or 50. I'll show you it because it's poor kids. So anyway, that's cool that added you in. Sometimes they're like, dude, making up 2 weeks of class, you're crazy. That's going to take forever because that would be, it's like 50. But was it not boring enough that you guys didn't fall asleep during it? I think it's pretty fascinating just because we all know people that have been affected by poor policy and stuff like that. But I guess what I'm saying, I'll keep them open. You don't need to feel rushed by it, but just like complete them and reply to people and you'll be okay. So this week, I guess, discussion, article, NPR, money. And then I just basically have one every week. It looks overwhelming, but if you just kind of like knock 1 or 2 out a day over the next week, till the end of the weekend, you'll be done with it. You'll be like, yeah, it wasn't bad. I feel like I try to make it pertinent to real life and things that we're experiencing today. So I hope it's not, too far out there because it really is about policy that affects us every day. Is it really already 3:30? Wow. Any other questions? Did you get the syllabus at least? So you can get into Schoology, which is where you'll get everything. Okay. Oh, don't show snow shovel when you're 43 years old. My arm is like dead. Ow. And it was a lot of snow. Oh, that is all I have for today, but I'm always open for questions. And so the other thing, just so you know, is we've had these. And because it's YouTube Live, it saves them all. And if you need to watch a